Amazing transformation. Cowboy's heroic rescue sparks the widow's touching secret. Will you stay? Jake tightened his grip on the reins, feeling the beads of sweat sliding down his brow as he rode through the relentless Texas heat. The townsfolk had always whispered about him, and their judgment sat heavier on his shoulders than the saddle on his back. At 35, he was a man bound by tradition, haunted by the ghosts of his family's ranching legacy that seemed to be crumbling, much like the dusty landscape around him. Each passing day was a bitter reminder of the emptiness lurking within him. The weight of his family's expectations only compounded his sense of inadequacy. A sudden commotion yanked him from his thoughts. He spotted Sarah, the widow from the rundown ranch on the edge of town, kicking up dust as she struggled to contain a runaway horse. Panic flashed in her eyes, a raw reflection of his own. That's when the hands-off shit didn't matter. He could either turn back, lost in the machinations of guilt and self-doubt, or charge forward like he always did with his cattle. He chose the latter. Heart racing, he galloped toward her, adrenaline surging. The horse, a chestnut beast wild with panic, snorted and tossed its head. Jake's mind whirled. How could he rescue her and not endanger himself? But there was no time to question his fears. His body sprang into action as he leaped between Sarah and the horse, thrusting his arm out just as the fierce animal reared up. In that moment, their eyes locked and everything shifted. The unspoken pain they shared turned the noise of the world into a faint whisper. When the dust finally settled, he could see her trembling, vulnerable yet grateful. "Thank you," she managed, her voice a mixture of relief and sorrow. But Jake was already lost in swirling thoughts. What if he hadn't acted in time? What if he had failed? But her next words shattered that internal battle. She had letters, a testament to dreams long buried, written by her late husband about transforming the very ranch they stood upon into something that could uplift the community. Jake's breath hitched. It was a grand dream, but so different from the ranch he had known all his life. Could he dare inspire change when failure had been his familial curse? Before they could explore those letters, Jake knew he had to untangle her finances. And yet, as they worked together, lines blurred between duty and desire. He could feel the whispers of the town swirling in the background, each taunt weighing heavy on his resolve. How could a ranch hand and a widow with tattered dreams forge a new path? Fear coiled in his chest. Was he courageous enough to challenge the closed-off hearts and minds of those who clung to tradition? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The stakes increased as they faced mounting financial woes, each burden threatening to tear them apart. Jake often found himself wrestling with his need for acceptance, clashing against an undeniable connection. Moments passed in silence, fraught with certainty and self-loathing. Every glance exchanged an unraveling strand of hope, but also fear. As talk of old rumors resurfaced, digging deeper into his psyche, he felt the weight of the town as condescension crushing down harder. What if they had it right? What if their dream doomed them both? With each day, he grappled with his diminishing strength to combat the bitterness festering inside him. Would he find the courage to face them, or would the oppressive shadows of doubt sever his growing bond with Sarah, leaving them both forgotten in the dust? Jake stood at the edge of a precipice, decisions looming, with both the future and love hanging in the balance. The path ahead offered no clear answers, only turmoil and sleepless nights. And as the Texan stars blinked in the vastness above, he could feel their weight urging him to rise or fall. The morning dawned with a heavy stillness, the kind that wrapped around Jake like a suffocating blanket. He had barely slept, haunted by the shadows of self-doubt and the unrelenting melody of whispered judgment echoing in his mind. As the sun crested over the horizon, illuminating the dusty ranch land, he felt like a ghost wandering in search of purpose. He was drawn to the barn, the familiar smell of hay and leather both comforting and oppressive. Each stride toward it felt heavier than the last. Inside, he found Sarah poring over the letters, her brow creased in concentration. The pastel colors of her faded dress swayed gently in the breeze that found its way through the cracks. She looked up as he entered, her eyes brightening momentarily before settling back into a shadow of worry. Jake could see the flicker of hope in her gaze, a fragile light that was easily extinguished by the reality of their circumstances. "I've been thinking," Sarah began, breaking the silence. "These letters, they're a vision, a dream, but it's going to take more than hope to bring it to life." Her voice trembled slightly, and Jake could see the weight of the world pressing down on her. "I know," Jake replied, the words catching in his throat. "But how? What if I can't help you? What if no?" She cut him off, a fire igniting within her. "What if you can? You saved me from that horse, Jake. You have more strength in you than you realize." Her faith rattled something deep inside him. A nagging voice of doubt shouted that his past failures would taint his future attempts, that he was tying himself to a dream destined for ruin. But was he willing to risk igniting that stubborn spark of courage? Jake's mind raced with possibilities and fears. What would it mean to embrace this vision alongside her? To challenge the very traditions that confounded him? "Let us start small," Sarah suggested, her tone softening. "We can host a community meeting, share the vision. We need to uncover what is holding us back, what resources we actually have." Her optimism was infectious, and in that moment, he felt a swell of determination rising within. He thought of the townsfolk, their judgmental gazes, and how they viewed him an outcast of sorts, more failure than Cowboy. But perhaps, if he stepped outside those constraints, if they all did, they could reshape those harsh perceptions. "All right," he said, his voice steadier than before. "We'll tell them about your husband's dream. But if I do this, I can't go back. I need to know how to face those whispers." Sarah nodded, her eyes sparkling with gratitude and understanding. Together, they would face more than financial troubles. They would confront a community steeped in skepticism in the days that followed. Jake and Sarah began making preparations. It was exhilarating yet terrifying. He found himself stepping into roles he had long avoided. A planner, an advocate. Even with the growing excitement, a knot remained in his stomach. Each meeting drew closer, taking shape like the sprawling Texas sky that loomed above them. But doubt lingered like an unwelcome storm cloud. As they entered the final hours before their presentation to the town, Jake started to second-guess every decision he had made. Would they listen? Or would they see only what they wanted to see, the failure that haunted him? With Sarah by his side, he held on to that flicker of purpose she inspired in him. Just when the lights started to dim under the weight of their fears, Jake caught sight of the letters again, their ink still bold and full of life. He had to remind himself that sometimes a leap of faith was the first step in carving out a new legacy. The evening of the meeting arrived, as the town gathered with curiosity, skepticism, and perhaps a sprinkle of hope. As Jake stepped up to speak alongside Sarah, he felt an electric mix of fear and determination coursing through his veins. He was standing at the precipice now, a choice before him, to cower under the weight of judgment or to rise above it. The first words trembled on his lips, hesitant yet ignited with authenticity. You may not see it yet, but the murmur shifted in the air around him, drawing every gaze toward him. The moment was poised, pregnant with possibility, holding the promise of hope intermingled with fear. But before he could finish his thought, the door creaked open wide, and the very faces he had dreaded to confront entered the room, their expressions unreadable. The stakes had just escalated as he braced himself to face not just their judgment, but the truth of his own courage. Would he falter, or could this be a transformative moment for them all? Jake felt the tremors of uncertainty ripple through him as he faced the gathering crowd, their eyes piercing through his facade, weighing him as if he were an open book of failures. Suddenly, the room felt smaller, the air thicker, and with every heartbeat, He questioned whether he would find the right words. He had taken the first step into unknown territory, and now all he could do was cling to the small thread of purpose Sarah ignited within him. He cleared his throat, forcing his attention away from the judgment he feared. You may not see it yet, but we believe there's a way to breathe new life into this land of vision that could change everything. His voice wavered but held a steady undercurrent of passion that surprised him. As he continued, Jake observed varied expressions in the faces around him. Some wore the masks of curiosity, others sported skepticism. The whispers of doubt still echoed in his mind, sharpening his focus, but with every word, he discovered a hidden reserve of strength. He spoke of the letters, of the dreams penned within those yellowed sheets, revealing not just aspirations but deep-rooted connections to the ranch and the life it offered. Yet, just as he felt himself gaining momentum, the specter of his past loomed larger. Rusty Muldoon, the town's self-appointed moral compass and a man with a penchant for deriding others' failures, stood at the rear. Jake felt his heart sink. He remembered the dimly lit tavern conversations, the dismissive smirks thrown his way when he attempted to forge a life beyond his limitations. Now, Muldoon's presence felt like a boiling pot waiting to erupt. You seriously think this place and you can change? Muldoon's voice resonated, sharp as barbed wire, cutting through the air. You were just a washed-up failure who got lucky once. Jake's got twisted as his adrenaline rose. Failure. It was a label he had clung to for far too long, and it now stung more than ever. But in that moment of vulnerability, he grasped something profound. Perhaps confronting that failure head-on was the only way to reclaim his identity. His past didn't define him. It had merely shaped him. Every failure is a lesson, Jake retorted, feeling the weight of his previous uncertainties shift slightly. Every stumble can lead us to something greater. What matters is the effort we put in, the willingness to change. He locked eyes with Muldoon, steadying himself against the storm of disdain. At that moment, he witnessed a flicker of surprise in Muldoon's eyes, perhaps even a hint of respect. The crowd shifted. Uncertainty morphed into intrigue. Jake could feel the collective breath held, the tension changing course. He turned back to Sarah, seeing her nod of encouragement reigniting the flicker of purpose sparking his resolve. There's a dream in these letters that can bring us together. He continued, finding his rhythm, the confidence growing with each sentence. But we can't do it alone. We need to support each other, draw from our strengths, and dare to envision a future that matters. As he spoke, words flowed more fluidly, unearthing buried aspirations and hopes not just for them, but for the entire community. They had become more than a struggle. They were a chance for transformation, a journey worth embarking upon together. By the time Jake concluded, the crowd erupted into murmurs, a blend of confusion and consideration. He had planted seeds, punching through chains of doubt. Yet as he stepped back, the nagging question remained, had he done enough? As Sarah stepped forward, her presence invigorated the room. The tension remained, but within it simmered a sense of possibility, a foundation laid for future dialogue. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their eyes shift back towards him. His vulnerability had exposed the rawness of his fear, but it had also laid open the chance for courage and change. And if they were willing to listen, a revelation awaited not just him, but everyone around. What he didn't know was how deep this journey would push him, or what unspoken truths would surface from the shadows of their collective pasts. But he felt unyielding determination course through him. It was no longer about proving himself. It was about forging a path worth treading. The night deepened and the gathering shifted in atmosphere. But just then, with the room still alive with unresolved emotions, a familiar face appeared at the back, one he and T expected to see. The person who once had the greatest hold on his fears had now stepped into the light, their intentions unclear, yet undeniably impactful. Would this revelation catalyze change, or would it unravel everything Jake had fought for? Jake's heart raced as he locked eyes with the familiar face at the back of the room. It was Molly, The woman whose laughter had once brightened his darkest days and whose silence had echoed painfully in his absence. She stood there, a mix of surprise and concern etched in her features. And for a moment, all the words and resolve he had mustered began to crumble under the weight of her gaze. "Jake," she called softly, the tone laced with a nuanced vulnerability that stirred both comfort and fear within him. He felt exposed, the fleeting confidence he had garnered vaporizing, leaving behind a raw wound of uncertainty. Would she be the anchor he needed, or would her presence only remind him of the fracture between who he was and who he wanted to be? As the murmurs around them subsided, it was clear that the crowd hadn't overlooked her arrival. Eyes shifted between Jake and Molly, curiosity morphing into speculation. The tension thickened as he ventured forward, unsure of how to navigate the waters that had once flowed so easily between them. "Molly," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper, each syllable weighted with unspoken words, hidden emotions. "What are you doing here?" Her response was delayed, a churn of emotions flickering in her eyes. "I came to understand, to see." She glanced at the others gathered, then back at him. "You spoke of dreams and unity. I want to know if those dreams were still as bright as I remember." Jake was acutely aware of the stakes involved. He had already battled his past. Now, he faced a specter of his past that personified hope and longing. And in her inquiry, he recognized a challenge. The fragility of his dreams could either fracture under scrutiny or solidify into something transcendent. Without thinking, he turned back to the crowd, heart thumping like a war drum, rage and purpose entwined in a single resolve. What we're striving for here is more than mere words. It's the grit of survival, of forging connections even when the lines have blurred. Molly's presence ignited something deep within him. This was not their old dynamic, the one he had chased and then frightened away. No, they were navigating uncharted waters now, demanding that he present not just a better version of himself, but a fully transformed individual, someone worthy of her understanding and perhaps her trust. As he spoke, Jake found that he was drawing on memories of their time, together long evenings on the porch, shared laughter under starlit skies, the way she had challenged him to be more. His words became a bridge, not only to the crowd, but back to her, as if inviting her to stand beside him rather than lurking in the shadows of his past. "I believe in the strength of this place, and I believe that each of us carries pieces of that strength within ourselves. We've got to reach for those fragments together." His voice grew louder with conviction, transforming the room's atmosphere, the crowd's skepticism ebbing away like the tide at dawn. Curiosity morphed into something larger, a yearning for change. But then, just as Jake began to feel the weight of his past sliding off his shoulders, Rusty Muldoon stepped forward once more, his gaze as cutting as the previous encounter. "And you think one little speech, one familiar face, will change the minds of these folks? Or yours, for that matter?" Jake's stomach churned at the challenge. The simplicity in Muldoon's accusation felt like a direct strike at the newfound resolve he had only partially grasped. "It's not just about words, Rusty. It's about action. It's about proving worth through determination. And I intend to do just that." The crowd murmured again, their collective curiosity morphing into something tangible. He internally steeled himself against the pull of doubt. They were watching not just him, but the evolution of who he was becoming. Molly moved closer, a tangible sign of solidarity, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose anchor within him. Perhaps she was the catalyst he needed to solidify his commitment, to turn the embers of change into a roaring fire. Just then, the unease that had shadowed the evening settled into an unresolved foreboding. Jake realized that revealing his weaknesses was only the first step. Would it lead to the transformation he needed? Or would every revelation lead to further resistance? As determination ignited within him again, he knew he stood on the precipice of something significant. This was not just a fight against disapproval, but a dance with possibility. Whether it all ended in triumph or failure, the outcome remained cloaked in mystery, and he craved clarity. With every challenge he faced, Jake understood now that his journey was just beginning. What lay ahead was bound to shape him in ways he couldn't yet envision. Could he truly bridge the divide between his past and present, ultimately transforming not just himself but the very fabric of his world? The answer danced beyond his grasp, teasing yet ungraspable, as Jake braced himself for the next confrontation with both the townsfolk and the demons within. He could feel the winds shifting, and with them, the heartbeat of a transforming future. What lay at the edge of those winds was an awakening he could not ignore. Would he harness it, or would it sweep him away? Jake felt the weight of Rusty's challenge lingering in the air. As he stood at the crossroads of self-doubt and aspiration, he realized that this moment was not merely about confronting Rusty. It was a full-bodied reflection on the man he had become. His pulse quickened with the dual pressures of the crowd's expectations and the newfound urgency ignited by Molly's presence that he glanced at her, hoping to draw strength from the warmth in her eyes. But beneath that warmth, he sensed the echoes of judgment and longing. The pressure enveloped him like a storm cloud, so thick he could barely breathe, making every cell in his body feel alive with the demand to perform, to prove that he had changed. "I know you think I'm just a flash in the pan, Rusty," he called out, his voice steady yet strained. "But change isn't a one-time event. It's a process, and I'm here to show you that process through action." The crowd's response was a resonant murmur, the air thick with anticipation. In that moment, Jake realized he needed to deliver more than just words. He had to map out a plan, one that extended beyond this room, and even beyond his own personal struggles. He had to provide a vision, one that others could rally around. Visions required clarity and conviction. As he looked out at the faces staring back at him, he understood that true leadership meant vulnerability. "I stand here before you, not only to advocate, but to invite each of you into this journey of collective growth. What if we took our skills, our passions, and combined them? What if we created something together that reflects who we are? It starts with recognizing our shared strengths, doesn't it?" Rusty smirked, but Jake could see the shifting of the crowd's energy. "So now what? Assemble a meeting? Pass around a sign-up sheet?" Frustration ignited in Jake, and he resisted the urge to let that frustration shape his response. Instead, he took a step back, took a deep breath, and allowed purpose to guide him. "No, it's more than that. I'm saying we can pool our resources, share our experiences, and turn this into a platform for innovation and hope. It's about action. We can learn from every failure and celebrate every success together." Molly's nod solidified his resolve. He saw in her a flicker of that same spark that once fueled their dreams drawn from their past, yet poised to propel him forward. Rusty remained skeptical, but Jake saw the flicker of intrigue igniting in the eyes of some others in the crowd. He pressed on, sensing an opening. "I know we're not perfect. I've stumbled and carried burdens that have weighed heavy on my heart. But I am here, ready to face the hard work ahead. And I invite you to join me not because I'm asking, but because you believe in what we can achieve." Suddenly, silence fell, charged with a shared yearning for something greater. Jake's outpouring of hope was a raw invitation to embrace messy growth, however challenging it might be. As the crowd began to shift, some to look at Rusty, others meeting his eyes, Jake felt a buoyancy sweep over him. For the first time, he could see it reflected back in their faces, a tapestry of potential. But even as a small flicker of hope blossomed within him, doubt started to claw its way back. Could he sustain this momentum? What if Rusty turned the tide quickly with one scathing remark? It felt as if the scales could tip at any moment, like a tightrope walker poised precariously above a chasm of uncertainty. Just as he began to contemplate his next words, Rusty stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Let us see if you can deliver on that something tangible. The town hasn't forgotten who you were. You have to prove you're not just a hollow shell. Bring your plan, Jake. Show us you mean it." Jake's heart sank for an instant, but a flicker of determination flashed within him once more. This was his moment to craft not just a response, but a plan, a course of action to confront his past and establish his identity. As Rusty's words lingered, the aura of challenge infused the atmosphere, pushing Jake toward another epiphany. It was time to reveal not only his worth, but his vision for the future. But how? With the eyes of the town upon him, and Molly still a grounding presence, Jake recognized that this transformation required depth. He couldn't navigate this alone. He had to harness the talents of those around him. Lost in thought, he knew that each part of this journey would forge connections stronger than any bond he had formed before. He could not do it in isolation, nor could he allow fear to shun him back into the shadows. The journey had just begun, and every step would demand authenticity and strategy. Would he discover hidden strengths along the way? And what if those strengths were buried deeper than he knew? As he prepared to articulate his vision, Jake felt the threads of possibility coalesce. This moment would define him, one way or another, and he was ready to confront whatever lay ahead. Would that clarity finally come to him, or would he falter yet again on this arduous path of transformation? Jake stepped back, his mind racing, and felt the weight of Rusty's challenge still looming over him. He could almost hear the heartbeat of the crowd in the still air, a continuous pulse of expectation pressing against him. It was time to shift from the fiery passions of ambition to the nitty-gritty of execution. The challenge had been laid down. He needed to devise a plan, a concrete set of steps that would not only fulfill Rusty's request, but also ignite the interest of those who were now watching him closely. He knew he needed to consider the skills and experiences of the people in front of him. They weren't just bystanders. They were potential allies and collaborators, each with their own unique abilities that could contribute to whatever vision he was about to present. And yet, how could he claim to lead this endeavor without first addressing his past failures? The thought gnawed at him, tugging him down into a whirlpool of self-doubt. With a deep breath, Jake scanned the faces surrounding him. Some were skeptical, remnants of a town that had not forgotten his past. But there were others, those who seemed to lean in, searching his gaze for sincerity. He needed to tap into that energy and weave a narrative that crystallized his vision not simply as a fleeting hope, but as a tangible reality. How about this? He began, the words shaping themselves through sheer determination. We embark on a journey fostering growth through skill workshops, mentorship programs, exchanges of ideas. Let us create a space where we can all share our failures and triumphs alike. I mean, how many times have we begun something only to see it fall flat? What if instead we learn from each other, refining our ideas, allowing them to evolve? As he spoke, Jake found himself drawing on memories of past dreams with Molly, their youthful laughter echoing in corners of his mind. Could he plant those seeds again, this time watering them with solid plans and dedication? Rusty's smirk faded, replaced by contemplation. Yet, Jake knew this wasn't enough. A vision without a strategy was merely rhetoric words spoken into the void. I will not only guide this process, but also gather a task force of volunteers who can help spearhead these workshops. We can involve local business owners, artisans, and every person here who believes we can forge a new narrative for ourselves. A ripple of murmuring swept through the crowd. He sensed that maybe, just maybe, he was striking a chord. Jake continued, a rush of adrenaline surging through him. We'll meet regularly, share our progress and challenges, and adapt our approach. Change is rarely linear. It's messy, and I want us to embrace that messiness together. If I stumble, I'll do it publicly. And if I falter, I want your honest feedback to help me stand tall again. And I promise I will do the same for you. As he urged the crowd forward, he also confronted the fear within himself, that overwhelming fear of being exposed as a fraud. Could he really be accountable to such a collective endeavor? For the first time, Jake allowed himself to imagine what success could feel like. It wasn't just about him rising to the occasion. It was about crafting a tapestry where each person's contribution shone through together. Could vulnerability breed strength in this community? Molly caught his eye again, and he felt an electric connection, a reminder that she believed in the vision he was formulating. In that instant, the vague tangle of ideas started to move toward clarity, and he felt a fire welling up inside him. I'll stand before you, not as a leader, but as a peer of fellow learner eager to forge a new chapter. Together, we'll map out the way forward. The first meeting can be this week. We'll brainstorm methods to bring our industries together, share resources, and develop solutions. The crowd now buzzed with murmurs of agreement and curiosity, but Jake sensed they were still holding back, waiting for the critical moment that could solidify their trust. Just then, he felt Rusty's gaze bore into him, like a gatekeeper holding the keys to Jake's potential acceptance. "Jake," Rusty interrupted, his tone sharp. "If that is all you've got, it's still not enough. You say this is a communal journey, but what happens if people don't buy into your idea? What if this doesn't yield the results you think it will? What then?" The weight of Rusty's words fell heavily on Jake's shoulders. What if he failed again? It was one thing to provoke hope. It was another to truly sustain it. Could he genuinely fulfill the promise of this transformation he was trying to initiate? With uncertainty creeping in, Jake realized that his vulnerability might yet be his greatest asset. What if by standing firm and sharing his fears, he invited others to do the same? Jake clenched his fists, resolved not to back down under scrutiny. "Rusty, I understand the doubt. All I can offer now is my commitment to learning from each of you, to adapting this plan based on real, actionable feedback. I'm open to the criticism and questions. This journey begins by acknowledging that each of us has been molded by our pasts. My past doesn't define our future unless we let it." The crowd held its breath, a charged silence enveloping them. He could feel them leaning in, caught between his promise and their skepticism, wondering what would unfold next. Would his appeal ignite a fire of collective commitment, or would doubt snuff it out before it had a chance to spread? As he faced their uncertainty, Jake knew the pivotal moment was approaching. The next steps would either solidify his stance as a leader or plunge him back into the depths of past failures. But now, it was more important than ever for him to uncover the depths of his own resilience. Determined, he stepped forward, and for the first time, he realized he might have the power to not only confront Rusty, but also to reshape his own story through the collective strength of their shared experiences. Could he harness that potential? Would the risks he was willing to take multiply the energy of what was already stirring in the crowd? The questions buzzed in the air like the growing anticipation around him. The moment of truth was drawing closer, and Jake could feel it within every fiber of his being. Time would reveal if this was truly the beginning of his transformation or another chapter of stagnation. Jake stood at the edge of the gathering, his heart thundering as anticipation swirled around him. The charged silence settled, each person's expectation hanging like a weight in the air. His mind flickered through a myriad of possibilities, but one thing became glaringly clear. He needed to act decisively. He couldn't let Rusty's challenge define him or turned out into a self-fulfilling prophecy. How do I get them on board? He pondered fiercely. There was no denying the visceral reality of his past failures closing in on him. Yet each painful memory seemed to serve as an unexpected teacher, revealing valuable lessons he hadn't fully embraced until now. It was time to shift into a mindset grounded in authenticity rather than fear. As he tuned back into the murmurs of the crowd, Jake could feel the pulse of energy transforming into a collective heartbeat. He visualized threads, each participant a strand woven into a tapestry. What if he could guide them to understand their individual strengths as pieces of a larger puzzle? At that moment, clarity pierced through his chaotic thoughts. "Everyone in this room has faced their struggles," he declared, his voice steadying with conviction. "But together, we can turn those struggles into strengths. What if we created an environment where we could openly share our obstacles and craft solutions? No one is alone in this endeavor. We rise together, and we learn together." He caught sight of Molly again. Her eyes brightened with hope. Her unwavering belief fueled his determination and lashed out against the self-doubt vining around him. The connection ignited something deep within him. He wasn't walking a path lit solely by his ambition. It was woven with the contributions and experiences of those ready to join him. Jake adjusted his stance, and as he did, He felt like a captain steering a ship. This isn't merely about a plan. It's about building a resilient foundation. I want everyone's voice defined roles, shared responsibilities. Everyone contributes based on their talents. Each of you carries a unique story worth sharing. Let us capitalize on our diversity. Rusty's expression had shifted, subtle curiosity replacing the earlier skepticism. Even that fleeting spark kindled hope in Jake. Imagine a series of workshops, he continued, his tone igniting enthusiasm. We could create avenues for mentoring one another. A forum for sharing what we've learned, mentoring newcomers, fostering creativity. The crowd seemed to respond, a bustling energy beginning to ripple through them. Jake leaned into it, relishing the momentum. Yet, he knew he stood upon shaky ground. Would his newfound resolve hold up under the pressure of scrutiny? Today marked a turning point. Yes, we recommit ourselves to growth, not just mine, but ours. Here is the challenge, folks. Who among you will step forward with me? The question hung palpably, echoing in the charged silence. In that moment, he decided to reveal a nugget of vulnerability, a calculated risk that could either bind him to the crowd or isolate him further. I've doubted my abilities, convinced that I could never lead a meaningful change. I was scared of failing you and myself again. But I've learned that embracing my vulnerability is part of this journey. The shift was instantaneous. A few people exchanged glances, and he noticed a few nods of understanding. It was a risk, yes, but it was a calculated one that he sensed might just connect them further. Rusty's brows narrowed, studying Jake's progression. If it's that easy, why haven't people jumped on board sooner? Jake took a breath. Sometimes, it's not the idea that needs a push. It's the execution, and execution requires trust. Today, I'm asking you to find that trust within yourselves first. I want to know what you think, your concerns, observations, and any insights. Rusty nodded slowly, the wheels turning in his head. The tension shifted subtly, cracking open a window for dialogue. This could be the moment that turned tentative interest into actionable commitment. It dawned on Jake that for every person ready to share their apprehensions, he had to be prepared to confront his own ongoing fears and invite mentorship from those around him, even from Rusty. What if vulnerability could be the most profound strength he ever possessed? Let us meet again this week, he pressed on. Each of us will think hard about what we need to let go of in order to embrace this new venture. Because standing in this moment together, we have a chance to redefine what success means. And as he scanned the crowd, a flicker of intensity ignited within Jake. He realized that he was no longer simply speaking to them. He was reaching into the depths of his own narrative, internalizing resilience, confronting what lay behind him. As the crowd began to respond, a collective rumble of voices echoed through the air, the threads of connection weaving tighter. But the uncertainty of Rusty lingered like a shadow. Jake understood that the real test was yet to come. The conversations after, the honesty demanded in the weeks to follow. What if embracing vulnerability opened a door for hidden strengths to emerge? Could he truly motivate them to take chances on ideas and on one another? The inner conflict surged within him like a tidal wave, and he took a deep breath. The moment to face his fears and uncertainties was rapidly approaching, and Jake sensed with visceral clarity that genuine leadership called not just for courage, but for an honesty he had never fully embraced. Would he be capable of transforming this fragile tether of hope into something that would sustain both himself and others? Jake felt an edge of raw anticipation building, an energy rife with promise and uncertainty. The power and potential of this new venture loomed on the horizon, enticing and terrifying all at once. What lay ahead could unravel everything he had worked towards or cement a path of unprecedented discovery. The real work was just beginning. The days following the gathering were a whirlwind of activity for Jake. Meetings filled his calendar, but they were different this time. Each conversation felt more like a rallying call, a commitment reinforced by a collective yearning for authenticity. Still, a stark realization crept closer. The measures of success weren't merely goals or accolades. They were the depth of connections he'd form and the willingness to face uncomfortable truth. He sat at his desk one evening, sketching plans for the upcoming workshops. Adrenaline surged through him as he put pen to paper, crafting a framework that made the abstract feel tangible. But with every stroke, doubt nudged its way in. What if it didn't show? What if Rusty, still holding back, undermined his efforts? The cascade of what-ifs flooded his mind. Yet where he once would have retreated, he pressed on, determined to confront these swirling insecurities. Preparation is key, he reminded himself, forcing the dark thoughts into the recesses of his mind. He trained himself to recognize those spirals, to dissect them as tools for improvement rather than walls blocking his vision. This reflective practice became a lifeline, allowing him to reframe doubts into constructive criticism. When the day of the first workshop arrived, anticipation crackled in the air. Jake arrived early to set things up, a physical embodiment of the change he sought. The room was bare, but his vision transformed it. He arranged chairs in a circle, envisioning dialogue rather than lecture. Each seat symbolized the notion that every participant mattered, that everyone's voice would contribute to the greater dialogue they were crafting together. As attendees began to trickle in, the energy shifted. He caught expressions: curiosity sparking in hesitant smiles, openness flickering in the glances exchanged among strangers. Among them, he spotted Molly, beaming with encouragement. It ignited his resolve. Perhaps he could indeed nurture this space to foster connection. As they launched into discussions, Jake remained attuned to the subtleties, the pauses, the hesitant disclosures, the laughter that broke the initial tension. Each person's journey wove into an unfolding narrative that mirrored his own. They shared not only ideas but vulnerabilities, recounting experiences that shaped their professional landscapes. He facilitated guided discussions, allowing the group dynamics to breathe freely, and as he did, a new confidence surged within him. Yet mid-conversation, Rusty raised a critical question that struck Jake to the core. What if this all falls apart? Jake felt the room still. In that moment, he had a choice: wallow in the fear or confront it head-on. It might, he admitted, the truth slipping out with unexpected ease. But what if it doesn't? What if we find resilience in our collective learning and uncover strengths we never knew we had? As those words hung in the air, Jake realized he had just addressed his own vulnerability and reinforced the bond they were forming through shared uncertainty. The reluctance in Rusty's eyes shifted slightly, a glimmer of respect emerging. They weren't opposites. They were allies navigating the same tumultuous sea. Jake sensed the tension dissipating, a suppressed energy unlocking. As the session concluded, Jake encouraged everyone to reflect on one personal challenge they wanted to share next week. This commitment was not merely about growth. It was about trust and honesty. Fielding questions and engaging in deeper discussions became integral, weaving an intricate fabric of shared narratives that wrapped around Jake, binding him closer to the collective. That night, as he reflected, a wave of gratitude washed over him. All the moments of self-doubt, the scrapes of fear, melded into something beautiful. He was not leading alone anymore. He was growing alongside those who dared to step into the light with him. However, beneath this budding confidence lay an uncomfortable truth. Jake knew that the real test loomed ahead, facing Rusty directly, sounding out genuine critiques that could expose fractures in his evolving framework. Am I ready for that? He whispered to himself. The stakes were rising, and the horizon shimmered with promise, yet uncertainty lingered. How might he elevate not just the group's ambitions, but his own? The beauty of vulnerability began to pulsate through him. Could it become his most potent catalyst? With a renewed resolve, Jake prepared mentally for the impending confrontation, excitement coursing through his veins. The real transformation was still unfolding, and the next meeting would reveal just how far he had come and how far he still needed to go. Would he seize the opportunity to redefine his own growth, or or would old fears claw back into the forefront? The morning light flooded through Jake's window, illuminating the clutter of papers and notes strewn across his desk. Today wasn't just another day. It was a pivotal moment. As he sipped his coffee, the heat radiated through the ceramic, grounding him in the present. Each brewing thought swirled around Rusty's looming critique. Awkward tension between them had shifted into a fragile connection, but the balance remained precarious. Would Rusty share his thoughts candidly, or would he choose silence, allowing doubt to fester? Jake arrived at the workshop venue early, the thrill mixed with tension bubbling in his chest. The seating arrangement remained as he designed a circle that represented unity and equality, but it now felt both inviting and confrontational. This space was ripe for new ideas and raw feedback, yet the realization pressed down on him like an anchor. The conversations would reveal not only the group's strengths and weaknesses, but his own. Participants shuffled in, and their presence electrified the air. Molly took a seat close to the front, offering a reassuring smile. Her subtle nod propelled Jake forward, infusing him with a surge of bravery. As the last attendee settled in, he absorbed the energy buzzing around him. Every face mirrored his own apprehensions, but also the hope of transformation. "Welcome back, everyone," he said, channeling warmth into his voice. "Today, let us dig deeper. We've all shared personal challenges. How can we use those as stepping stones instead of stumbling blocks?" The group buzzed with apprehensive whispers, yet their uncertainty sparked creativity. Each soul in the circle craved connection. But then Rusty leaned forward, his brow creased. "Let's talk about last week as commitments. I've thought a lot about the challenges we chose." His words sliced through the surface area of Jake's burgeoning confidence. Jake felt exposed, both exhilarated and terrified of the eventual fallout. "What do you think? Are they even relevant to our growth?" Rusty continued, his tone direct and challenging. It was as if he had identified a fissure in Jake's carefully constructed framework. A part of Jake wanted to dismiss the inquiry, to reframe it as irrelevant critique. Yet the more rational part of him recognized an opportunity for growth, a chance to face his discomfort head-on. Jake inhaled deeply, allowing the question to settle. "I appreciate your honesty, Rusty. Let us unpack this." The atmosphere thickened. Others leaned in, drawn to the unfolding tension. Jake's mind raced. How could he ensure that something constructive emerged from the confrontation, rather than defensiveness? "Perhaps we need to redefine relevance," Jake suggested slowly, grounding his response in vulnerability. "Each challenge, if we allow it to, can unveil something new about ourselves. Are ours illuminating enough for everyone?" The pause stretched out, leaving a palpable silence in the room. Rusty's gaze held him questioning, but no longer dismissive. Rusty shifted in his seat. "Assuming we even accept the challenge of their relevance, what if we uncover things we're afraid to confront? And what if we do?" Jake countered, emboldened by the engagement of the group. "What if this discomfort is precisely where our growth lies? Maybe our vulnerabilities can be our greatest teachers." The room buzzed with vibrant discussion, each voice contributing to the tapestry of collective experience. It was no longer just Jake's workshop. It had evolved into a forum of shared narratives and insights that challenged every person present. As the workshop neared its end, Jake felt a tangible shift. There were nods of agreement and sparks of realization. But deep within, a nagging question persisted. Was confronting Rusty's critique merely an exercise in openness for the group? Or was it the catalyst required to redefine his own authority and leadership? The session wrapped up with a crescendo of animated discussion, but as Jake gathered his notes, he noticed Rusty lingering. The man seemed ready to take a mental leap himself. Would he be able to embrace mutual vulnerability or retreat to guarded critique? "What do you think we should focus on next?" Rusty asked, his voice low but clear, eyes momentarily vulnerable. Jake's stomach twisted at the weight of his opportunity, not just to lead, but to challenge himself further. The stakes seemed to escalate, and a flicker of hope ignited in the air. But he hesitated, realizing this wasn't merely about Rusty's feedback. It was a moment demanding clarity and courage. How would he respond to a request that could shape both their growth? Jake took a deep breath, poised on the edge of revelation. What came next would define not just their partnership, but also the essence of his evolving leadership. It was more than a workshop. It was a crucible for transformation. Jake stood before the mirror that morning, a familiar but distant reflection staring back at him. The edge of anxiety, mixed with excitement, tingled in his fingertips. The workshops had become a beacon not just for the town, but for himself. They had transformed from mere gatherings into a sanctuary for growth, where mutual vulnerability had fostered trust and recognition. Today held significance beyond the ordinary today. He would integrate Rusty's insights into the evolving narrative of their collective journey. As he arrived at the venue, memories of past insecurities washed over him, conversations laced with uncertainty and whispers of doubt. Yet, in that moment, he felt the weight of those conversations shifting. They had taken root and blossomed into an understanding. Growth required accountability, persistence, and the willingness to embrace discomfort. The room filled to capacity with familiar faces, pulsating with energy. Molly's reassuring presence anchored him further, her unwavering belief radiating in a glance. Determined to challenge himself effectively, Jake approached the gathered crowd, who he now considered allies rather than critics. "Welcome back," he announced, his voice resonating with a newfound confidence. "Today we dive deeper into what we've learned and what we still must face together." As he began speaking, he noticed Rusty sitting front and center, an ally in the discourse rather than an opposition. "Before we continue, I'm keen to revisit our challenges from last week." Rusty raised a crucial point about their relevance. "How can we ensure every commitment we make resonates with our shared vision?" Jake allowed the question to billow in the room, encouraging mutual exploration. Rusty nodded, an acknowledgement of the conversation's evolution. He leaned in, his voice measured. "If our fears hold us back, we need some form of accountability, commitments we can actually act on." Jake felt invigorated, the exchange igniting perspectives across the room. "Absolutely. Let us discuss actionable steps. We need not just to voice our challenges, but to support each other as we take tangible steps toward resolution. Each week, let us track our progress collectively. Every success will reinforce our combined certainty." As the discussions sprang to life, rustling thoughts transformed into solid actions. Ideas unfurled in that sacred space. Notions that had once felt impractical were now laid bare with purpose. "Next week, let us each choose a specific skill related to our challenges workshops that align with someone's experience. Molly can lead a session on agricultural innovation. Rusty, with your network, you could host something fostering entrepreneurial collaboration together. We can inspire." The unity in their voices was electrifying, the atmosphere charged with purpose. That moment, a realization surged through Jake. Not only had he carved a new opportunity for growth within the community, but he had also begun to redefine his own narrative of self-doubt and failure. He understood that leadership was not solely about steering the ship, but about inviting others aboard, allowing their strengths to propel something bigger than himself. As the meeting wound down, applause reverberated around the room. For the first time, Jake felt the collective heartbeat of the community, not just his own endeavor for recognition, but a shared commitment to growth that would elevate them all. The change wasn't just professional. It rippled through every corner of their lives. They were unconsciously shedding burdens of fear, creating a visual tapestry woven from their stories. Later that evening, the glow of moonlight spilled onto his desk, where a single sheet of paper remained untouched as outline for future workshops and initiatives. He looked at the lettering, feeling deeper ownership than he had imagined. What stood before him was not just a plan, but a manifestation of his transformation, not merely into a leader, but a catalyst for genuine change. He took a moment to reflect. The doubts that once encumbered him were now whispers of encouragement molding his resolve. He could stand tall, face Rusty's critical eyes, and declare his evolution openly. Jake made a promise to himself. He would continue leveraging each workshop not as a single entity, but as a perpetual platform of shared experiences, collective learning, and empowerment rooted in vulnerability. They were no longer facing forward alone. Together they confronted past failures with a mindset of growth. As the days unfolded, he felt solid confidence mingling with humility. Each interaction strengthened his recognition in the community, building bridges he thought were irrevocably severed. Moments of camaraderie only deepened the impact of what he had begun. A chance to redefine not only his identity, but the very fabric of a community once overshadowed by reluctance. Jake had ultimately achieved much more than he ever anticipated. He stood tall amidst the remnants of his past, knowing well he had accomplished not only a leap in leadership, but also a fulfilling transformation. In embracing his vulnerabilities, he sculpted a narrative of strength, resilience, and interdependence that would resonate through the hearts and minds of those around him. Now, as the night drew near and the challenges ahead still loomed large, the sense of urgency rushed over him. The momentum was palpable, and action was imminent. He could no longer afford to delay his impact or diminish his worth. The next chapter loomed ahead, teeming with potential for collaboration, hope, and a vision of growth that transcended individual limitations. Jake had finally conquered not just the shadows of his past, but a vibrant future built not through isolation, but through an inseparable bond of shared dreams. With renewed conviction, he set to work, writing not just a plan, but his legacy a legacy of fulfillment defined by meaningful connection and an unwavering commitment to many more transformative moments to come. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will help inspire you on your journey. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Every click helps spread these powerful narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about Jake's transformative journey. We value your insights. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how vulnerability can lead to true strength and accomplishment. You can make a difference. Don't wait even one more second.